please tell us your name.
I'm Luba Goldberg.
And tell us where you were born and when you were born.
I'm born in October 1st, 1920, in Tighina, Basarabia, which was a state in Romanian. When I was born, it was Russia in 1918.
Luba, tell us something about your childhood.
I grew up practically the only child home because I had two sisters and a brother, which my older sister than myself was 18 years older. Their mother died when they'd been really young, and my father died, married many years later. And so I was a real small child when they'd been already in college. So I practically grew up one home and very spoiled by the older ones. When they've been coming home for vacation, like summer or Christmas time or Easter time, I really had a ball. I went to grammar school in home, and when I was 11 years, I got sick and I had scarlet fever, which at this time was a very dangerous infectious sickness. And I remember, like now, my brother was already a doctor, and he come home, and I heard I had the highest fever that anybody can have. And I heard he telling the parents, if I survive this night, then I will be okay, and I come out of it. But then later I had a complication with the kidneys, and I was a whole year in bed. And in this year I made 3 classes. I passed 3 classes. So when I finished high school, I was only 16 years old. And I left with a friend of mine, which was 18 years old, to Bucharest, to college. When we get there, then was no dormitories, and I come from a real kosher home, so it was a kind of difficult. But this girl had a friend, the parents' friend there, and we went there and took a newspaper, and at this time was rooming houses. So I find a family which was looking for a student to tutor 8-year-old boy in 2nd grade, and for this they would have housing and to eat. My father gave me money to rent a room and to have with me some, but I figured since my father supported 4 children in college, which was my 2 sisters, my brother, and my sister-in-law, which at this time wasn't my sister-in-law, but her parents went to the United States. And the second Saturday, when they'd been in New York, her father was killed on the sidewalk by a collision of a car in a pickup. So when they arrived to the United States, her father was a rabbi. He wrote a letter to my father that he hopes he left her in good hands. She stayed together with my 2 sisters at Iasi, which was a university city in Romania, where they went. So my father had to support 4 children at university. So when I was growing up, I figured that I should try to help myself. So I find in the newspaper an ad where they've been looking for somebody to stay there. So I went there, and it was a real nice Jewish family. But I told them that my friend, which she was 2 years older than me, has to be with me until she would get a place to stay. And this family was very nice, and they find her after 2 days a place. I stayed there a year.
Okay, Luba, let's go back a little bit earlier. When you were still living at home, tell me a little bit about the Jewish life in the place where you lived.
And the place where I lived was a lot, in Tighina was a lot of Jewish families. And I really never felt anti-Semitism, except in school where actually this wasn't anti-Semitism. This was maybe a bad move of the preacher, because they had religion in school, and was once a week, a religion hour, and he was sending me out in the hallway where it was really cold. And when my father came to ask him to give me permission to sit in the back in the class, he refused, saying that this is not for Jews. So the director permitted me to stay this hour in her office. But actually, there was no anti-Semitism.
Okay. Can you tell us now a little bit about the time when you were living in Bucharest in your college years?
Yeah, I worked there on 2 jobs. One was at the cafeteria, at the cash register, and I didn't eat at the cafeteria because it was not kosher. And the other one, at this time, the mail would come to a certain office. It had to be sent out to other offices. And I was getting paid for both jobs there. And this way I supported myself. I stayed only 1 year with this family, and after this, I rented for myself a room. And my father was my brother, my father, and one of my sisters kept on sending me some money. And I was trying to get gifts to bring home when I come. And then I went to my brother. When I finished, I went to my brother because usually when you finish university, they're teaching about Romanian language. This was my major. You have to go a year and teach in the country. But since I was a real good student, I obtained to go to a city which was next city from where my brother lived. You had to go by boat. It was Brăila. And then this is when the Russians made, the Germans made a friendship with the Russian.
Do you remember the year?
And end of 1940, we ran away from the Nazis, and we went to Russia, which was Bessarabia, was already Russia because the Germans forced them become friends with the Germans. The Russian and the Germans been friends, I guess, for a year and a half. So they forced Romanian to give back Bessarabia to the Russian, and the Russian took Bukovina, which was a part of Austria before, but did belong now to Romanian as interest for the 20 years that Romanian kept Bessarabia. So we decided to leave from the Nazi regime and go back home. My brother was a military doctor, so they've been very gracious. They gave him military honors and took all his belongings to the boat, and we left and we arrived in Russia in a city which was Rain. And there had to wait for a train car, so it can be loaded up the furniture and everything. And this was on a field. So we didn't have where to sit or to sleep, so we turned over a closet. This time the closets have not been built in, was made. Now they kind of come in style. So we turned this over, and it was my brother, my sister-in-law, and their daughter, which was a little girl. Now she is here in the country. And we stayed on the field there, waiting for a car train. My brother got an infection on his foot. He stepped on a nail, so he had to go to the hospital. And meantime, we saw that there's no end to get out from there. So I told my sister-in-law, I'm going to go home to the city, to Tighina, and see if our house is still free there, what is going on. Because my mother and the aunt was left in the house. My father died 2 years before, in 19. I was 18 years old.
1938.
38. So when I just come there, my mother and all my cousins said for us, my brother, not to come back there because the Russians been looking for him because he was a Romanian officer. So we decided that we will go to Chisinau, which was the capital of Bessarabia. We still didn't have any transportation, so I went there to some good friends which we had, which left much earlier than we left Romania. And soon I arrived there, and I was going in the streetcar. I had just a little overnight bag. I saw lots and lots, hundreds of people staying. So I went off the first station from the streetcar, And I asked, what happened here? And they said, what do you mean what's happened? They give bread. I couldn't understand what does it mean, because from where I come, everything was there. So I kept on walking, and I see again a big line, and I stayed listening, couldn't hear what is here. And I said, what is here? And they said, they give sugar. So very fast there was changed everything, the same system like in Russia. Everything disappeared from the market. When I went to these friends, they lived in a house with 4 bedrooms and a living room. And it was 5 families there living. And they lived in one room, a couple and a child. Still they asked us to come there. So the train car come to Kishinev, which stopped there on the line, and you could stay there for weeks till they move anywhere. So when we went there, then it was right away, 2 days later was an earthquake, a big earthquake. And we looked around, and there was no houses to find to stay because the Russians practically invaded there. It was full everywhere. So my brother, 2 years he worked in Chernovitz and in the military hospital. So we decided to go to Chernovitz. So he went there and checked and find with a family which they've been afraid it would be putting Russians in their house. And they gave up the biggest part of the house to us. So we moved in there. And when we moved in there, started the war between the Russians and the Germans. So before the war started, my sister was sending packages from Romanian food with one very rich person which had oil fields in Romania, and one was a officer, but he was not a permanent in the military. He was like a reserve officer. And my brother got a job. No, before this, when the Russians he had a job at the railroad as a doctor for the railroad, and my sister-in-law was working in a Jewish hospital. And when the Germans come in, they took away all the Jewish business right away. And they took us in a ghetto. Sealed all the houses, been sealed, and a certain area is supposed to be the ghetto. So we had a neighbor next door. We didn't know anybody in this area where the ghetto was. My brother had many friends, but which been doctors and which didn't live in the area where the ghetto was. So this couple said, you come with us and you'll stay with my father, with us. So we went there, and it was a miserable room, filthy, and old men there, but we still been happy. And the same night did come this friend of ours and this officer, and they took my little niece to Romania to my sister. So this night, my sister-in-law and I, we cried all night.
Take your time, Luba. Just take your time.
Because we had to part with the little girl. And late at night, it come officer and told my brother that this area would be evacuated the same night, and the people from this area would be deported because they're making the ghetto smaller. So we took whatever we could take in the hands, and we kept on going. Can I take Kleenex?
Right there in the box, Luba, right there.
So at night we left this place, and we went farther, deeper down. And we didn't know anybody again. So
You ran away, trying to get away from the deep.
Away. We already had to walk away through patrols. When we said we have relatives, and they let us going through because it was already closed up this area.
The Germans were doing these things at this point. The Germans formed this ghetto.
Formed the ghetto. The Germans together with the Romanian, because it was already anti-Semitic government, was called the Iron Guard, and was mostly conducted by the governor and by the was a special major. what did happen is, when they let us out, they took us to the ghetto. After they made the ghetto smaller and they deported some people, they let us out of the ghetto.
Tell us a little bit about the ghetto, what it looked like, and
Okay.
the
The
conditions.
ghetto was completely closed in, and you didn't. We went in a garage, and some people said there's a big garage in this open garage, and you can come and stay with us. But it wasn't where to sit unless on the cement or to sleep. So I went to the gate, and there was a soldiers been watching the gate. So I told the soldier that what he wants me to pay him to let me out to go home and watch me, wait for me when I come back. And he told me he likes a nice set of bed linen. I said, fine. So the reason I could go home, the house has been sealed, but the man who was the taking care of the building, he had TB, and my brother was always being his doctor and taking care of him. So he took a razor and took off the seal, let me go in the house. The first thing I brought 2 books, which my brother did need, and I took some salami and other things I could take, and I took a blanket. And then he sealed with some glue back the seal. He actually risked his life to help. And this is what I was doing about every day, going home and taking little things.
So you were going in and out of the ghetto?
In and out of the ghetto. So, there was natural only Jewish people. The non-Jewish people, whichever lived a few, they went out of there. They've been giving some Jewish houses. And very shortly, we've been let free to go out, everybody to go home. So we were thinking that we'd be already free. Well, it wasn't exactly so. They said that anybody who would not work would be deported. And
Do you know where people were taken when they were
taken
deported?
to Ukraine. So
And do you know what happened to those people?
most of the people been killed. I knew a truck driver, my sister knew him good, and I met him too, which got completely crazy because he saw what was done to children. The children been picked up, little children, picked up by the legs and thrown with the head to electric poles, and the brains just been flying.
And this kind of information came back to you?
Yeah, because
People?
come back from the drivers, because they've been taking, like if anybody had a truck or pickup, they've been taking it to deport people.
Mm-hmm. People were carried out in trucks?
Yeah, in trucks, pickups, yes.
And were they taken to a camp or just taken to be killed?
Taken to be killed. Anybody went to Ukraine, first was killed right away, the old people and the children, and then later the other people, especially if they've been sick or they couldn't work. So did come a friend again for my family and was bringing us now again food because it was impossible to find any food. So he asked me to work for him. He took over a big Jewish business which was more than a block long upstairs and in the basement. And this was a business which starting from eggs and finishing with tractors and all kind, everything. And I said, well, I never liked business. I never went in even to my father's business, but I will try. And I went in there and I decided, well, I'm going to take it. And I learned very quickly. I told him I take 2 weeks, and if I can do it, I will work, and if not, I will tell him. And after a few days, I told him I take the job, which was really paid practically nothing. But I took in a few more friends of my brothers because everybody's supposed to work. And this man who owned this business, he was a professional engineer. He was traveling all the time. He made little business all around this. Chernobyl was a big city and had 10,000 Jewish people in the city. So he was traveling around in the country and taking whatever they need in the country and bringing food into the city. So was a young man there working, and his father was shot on the street, and he had a mother and a little brother. And one day I told him, you know, we should give Hugo, now comes Easter, he's a Jewish boy, should give him a few eggs and a chicken. And he said, tell him to bring a jar, and if there's any broken eggs, let him get the broken eggs. So I told him, Hugo, bring a jar and get broken eggs. He broke eggs and took and helped other people too. Everybody worked there for practically nothing. So one day, 5 o'clock in the morning, is a knock on the door, and I was the closest to the door. When I opened the door, did come a policeman and a soldier and said they made a mistake. Instead to put Luba Schreibman, is my maiden name, they put Leib Schreibman, head of the family. And they said, we come to pick up Leib Schreibman, head of the family. And I looked and I said, there's not anybody like this. It's a Luba Schreibman, and this is me. He said, well, we have to pick you up with the family. I said, well, I'm not the head of the family. I just live with my brother. So the policeman left, and he left the soldier to watch me to take my luggage. And the soldier sit in a big chair, and he was writing. And he wrote this and this date, I'm in the house of Dr. Schreibman, and I would never forget this most horrible day of my life. And I looked from the back what he writes. In the meantime, I sneaked out, and I called the brother of my boss, which was the good friend of the governor. And I told him the situation. He said, don't worry, I'll take care of you like I take care of my son. Just don't worry, I'll come and get you out. So I had to go, and my sister-in-law cried, and my brother was in tears, and they packed a suitcase, and I said, I'm not taking anything because I'm not going. I'll be back. I was 100% sure I come back till I got there. And the way they told me...
Did they say why they were taking you away?
Well, yes, I knew why. Because they didn't have any more. They've been deporting all kinds of categories. People which are unable to work, people which are not good for, like they've been doing, digging for fortifications, things, and they couldn't do it. People which been exempt from the army before, they've been taking all kinds of selections. Now what they did, since they didn't have any more of this, like a company had 50, like our company had 50 people working, they cut the list in half. Since my name was with a S, I was in the bottom. So this how I was.
In order to reduce the number of employees.
Of the Jewish people, to reduce, to deport, to have a reason to deport. Half is enough. So and the way the men told me that go up on the wagon, the soldier left, and a policeman was watching me from now on. And I was the only one from our area, because it was not a strictly Jewish area. And I said, no, I'm walking. I don't go on this wagon. And I walked to it was called Maccabi Sports Place. And there's accumulated 4,200 people. And when I got there, it was a terrible day. It was wind and rain and sunshine. I had a green raincoat and a scarf, and the policeman kept on saying, oh, where's your suitcase? So, because I've been moving around all the time. When I was close to the fence, a soldier told me there was a broken board missing, a wooden board, and he said, how much you give me to let you out from here? And I said, well, now I cannot give you anything because I will be shot on the other side. But if you stay there till an evening, everybody could take 2,000 lei. This was permitted to take with you. I said, I give you all I have. So he said, you find me here. But I really didn't intend to go out from there because I knew on the other side is dangerous. It's watched on the other side too. So I stood there and I saw it was a commission, a long table and a kind of covered with a roof, and people been like a commission which is selecting. But I looked and I didn't see anybody from people going there. And then I noticed a professor from the university, which was visiting very often. His wife was away and he was eating supper with us and coming. And I decided I would go to him. And when I approached him, I took off my raincoat and took off my scarf so the policeman would not recognize me, and I sneaked away from him left him with the luggage, which I wasn't interested. When I come to him, and he said, believe me or not, I don't have any power. I'm just sitting here like a puppet. This is just for the newspapers that there's a commission here. But there's nobody to talk to, and I cannot do nothing. I wish I can do. So I left. And I still didn't go back to my place, and I was just thinking how I can get out. And all of a sudden was put two lines, like two strings, one of police and one military. And in the middle was Germans and Romanian and civilian military and civilian people talking. And I knew one of them is the head of the deportation. He was a major. So I decided I have to talk to him. And I was really very, very skinny. As a matter of fact, some of my girlfriends, if they got mad at me, they've been calling me the match. So I sneaked sidewise, and I struck through the police and through the military man, and I got in the middle, and the Romanian officers are wearing a belt from the shoulder this way and a belt this way, and I caught this belt, and I said, you have to listen to me. So the other ones kind of backed up, and I said, I worked on the job not because I did need a job for money, because I lived with my brother and sister-in-law, they was doctors, but because a Romanian man come and help me, ask me for help. And if you think that I have to go to death for helping a Romanian, then judge yourself. So he said, what authorization you have? What did happen? The mayor gave to people authorizations to remain in the city, and the governor was two kinds of authorization that you can stay and not to be deported. Now, the mayor had a conflict, or the governor had a conflict with the mayor, and was ordered that all these which have the authorization from the mayor to be deported. And only the ones who have authorization to remain, but the governor to stay. And we had authorization from the governor. As a matter of fact, my brother was one of the first getting this authorization. So he said, what kind of authorization you have to stay? I said, from the governor. He said, well, where is your authorization? I said, home. I'm with my brother. We are in the family. He said, go home and get it. I said, well, you have to, and I kept on holding. I never let this belt go. I said, you have to give me a paper. And meantime, the policeman find me, because when I was in the 4,200 people, he couldn't find me, but when was a big circle, empty circle, he saw me, and he come running there. And when he approached there, he says to him, I take her home and let her bring the authorization. So he asked her written not to, because he had orders not to bring anybody to the police. Everybody has to be deported, the policeman. And the Romanian people, police, whatever they've been, basically they have not been anti-Semitic. They've been anti-Semitic only when they had some material interest, some profit from it, but not from the nature. So he took me home to get authorization, and we went in the streetcar, and I was holding myself pretty good all day. Matter of fact, when I took off my coat and my scarf, I put on some lipstick, and I looked in the mirror if I looked presentable enough, because some people think if you look never, not so good. So, no, I had a different opinion. And when we've been in the streetcar, this professor, a friend of ours, he was there too, and he says to me, this is the first time when I broke down. He said, I'm so happy to see you, that you're out. So I said, thank you, and this is the first time there come tears to my eyes through the whole day. And I got home, and when I got home, my sister-in-law recognized my steps, and she fainted. And my brother opened the door and hugged me, you're home? And I said, no, I need a paper. Yeah, before we left the sports place there, the policeman said, now what I'm doing with your luggage, we have to take the luggage. I said, I don't care about the luggage. I said, do whatever you can. So he took a push wagon, a man with a push wagon took his ID and sent him home with my suitcase. And I took the paper from my brother, and he kissed me, and I left. again. And when we come back to the Maccabi Platz, everybody was gone. So the policeman said, what I'm going to do with you now? I said, well, take me to the police station and tell them what had happened, and they will clarify tomorrow. So he said, no, I have orders. I cannot bring anybody. I have to take you to the train station. I said, okay, but you would not put me in the train. When I was on this Maccabi Platz, I met a woman which had 4 kids left with a neighbor, and they took her by herself, and she's supposed to be free because her husband worked for the army at this time. And she cried, and she had nothing, just empty-handed, not a penny with her, nothing, nothing. So here he takes me to the train station, and there I met the head of the Jewish community. He was giving everybody half a bread for joint. This was an American organization. And I told them, I said, listen, can you do something for me? This and this is the situation. Because he was coming and all the telephone business doing from the business where I worked, because the Jewish community was taking the telephone away from them. So he said, I wish I can. All in my power here is to give a half a bread to everybody. And when I looked to the window from the train, I saw this woman holding the iron bars when closed already, the train car. So I pushed in my pocketbook where I had 2,000 lei, pair of pantyhose, lipstick, whatever. I pushed it in the pocketbook because I decided I'm not going to go. Whatever would happen, he's not going to put me on the train. I was determined. And when we stood there was a captain waiting for this major, which was organizing the deportations, and was 2 more trains, car trains, which supposed to be filled up and brought new victims to be put in. So he was waiting for him to take out a few people which worked for the army. So he asked me what happened to me, and the policeman told him. So when the major came and asked this captain, what can I do for you? He said, this young lady is before me. So he looks at me, he said, what are you doing here? I send you home. I said, yes, but he needs to have a treatment. So he wrote down, because she's an orphan and supported by her brother, she's let free. So I told them, I wanted to thank you, but really do not exist any words to thank somebody who saved your life. And I left home. Next day when I got up with very high fever. And my brother checked me, and 2 other friends, doctors, checked me, and nobody could find anything. And then they brought not neurologist, a doctor, a psychiatrist. And he said that I have a very strong mind, or whatever you call it, and this fever is from nerves. And the only thing I didn't want to see is people. Otherwise, nothing disturbed me, and the fever, I was burning up from fever. And he said, I have to get off the bed and just keep on going on the streets, eating normal, sitting normal, and this would go away. And right in a few days, everything went away. And I didn't go anymore, naturally, back to work at this place. And we stayed there. We had friends, Russian. No, wait a minute. This is... no, okay. So then the Russians start to come back. See, the Germans lost in Leningrad, and the Russians start to come back. So when the Russians been 40 miles from Chernobyl, where we lived, I told my brother and my sister-in-law, let leave, because the Germans, I hope we would overlive. They're breaking down now. The Russians would overlive us. And my brother just couldn't make this decision. So I took a suede jacket and a sweater and a nightgown, and I went with the last train, and I left.
Where were you going?
I was going to Romania.
Going back to
Where
Romania.
actually still was the Germans, but I had 2 sisters in Romania. And when I got in the train, the door's been closed when I got to the train. So I told one of the soldiers, was a Romanian soldier, I told my parents are there, they work for the city. And I was talking to a friend, and I am left out. And he, with the other end of the gun, knocked on the door opened, and he pushed me up, and I left, and this was the last train. And when I was standing, it was full packed with people. And was sitting two big girls, natural, non-Jewish. And one of them said, sit on my lap, come here, you're so little, come here. And I sit, and all of a sudden, the door opens and went in 3 gendarmes. This is a special Romanian department of soldiers, and took off a couple through the window. Very nice, very well dressed, a Jewish couple. I didn't know they're Jewish till they come up and told them, somebody told on them that they're Jewish, with 3 big suitcases thrown up in the window and took them out of the window. So my knees started to shake my knees. And I got very nervous, so I was afraid these girls would observe. So I told them, I have to go to the bathroom, and I cannot go through. So the girl says, come on, I push you through, because she was big and fat. She pushed me through, and soon I got more to the public. I went in and lost them. And I got to Baku, which is the city where my 2 sisters been living. And when I got there, I didn't know anybody, and I didn't have any money, because it was different money already. And I looked around, and a colonel says to me, are you looking for somebody? And I said, yes, I come to visit. I didn't tell him that what happened. I come to visit my sister, and I'm looking, and there's nobody around. And he says, who's your sister? And I said, Dr. Gelfand. Well, she's my wife's doctor. He said, wait a minute. And he called, they had wagons with horses at this time. He called the soldier and told him to give me a ride to Dr. Gelfand, and took me to my sister. And when I got to my sister, she had my niece, which was not legal there. And now I come, which I am not legal again. So I went to my other sister. After 3 days, it come out the ordinance that everybody refugees who come in have to declare themselves. So my sister said, no, don't do it. I said, no, I will, because I don't want to put you in danger. So I went to the police, and I registered. And after 2 days, they took us in a church, put everybody who did come in the way I come in. And it wasn't too many, it was about 35 people. But it was very filthy, because there was the children from Transnistria, which been brought in there before, and was with lies, and really terrible place. So my brother-in-law brought me a mattress, but I could not see myself sleeping on the mattress, and a couple of old people on the floor, so I gave them the mattress, and most of the time I spent there sitting and sleeping, until they changed from the police to military people to watch us. When the military people come, I made a deal with them, was another girl and myself, that they would let us out groups by 10 to be able to go to someone's relatives and take a shower and bring something in to eat. They actually did give us to eat, it's just not the food that we wanted. And then they let us out from there after about 3 weeks. And we had to go once a month to the police to present ourselves. Then they sent us a letter that they wanted to save us from the Russians, since the Russians are advancing, to save us, to send us different Romanian. So whoever wants to go, naturally nobody wanted to go. So then the Russians come back to Romania. When the Russians come back to Romania, my brother-in-law was supposed to, they asked him to come and translate from Russian to Romanian. But he had a business, so I went the one which started to translate. And the commandant was a very simple man. He was putting shoe horses to horses in Russia, but he was in the war. He had many medals, and he was the commandant. But he knew himself. He knew that he is a very simple man. Like when the governor made a party, he asked me to go and represent him and to say that he's sick. And I said, why? Everybody likes you. He said, but I don't know how to eat with a fork and a knife, and I don't want to embarrass my country. So I worked there for a short time because I decided to open a school there for girls between 15 and 20 years to learn a profession and to study some, which was Romanian language, math, one language, and this was a half a day, and the other half a day was a profession, which was 3 of them. One was to make Persian carpets, one was to make lingerie and embroidery, and one was sewing, which we find teachers for all the departments. And in summer, before the school opened, my sister gave me a certificate that I'm sick, I have to go in the hospital so I could leave the place where I was translating. And I opened this school, which I ran 2 years.
And what year was this that the school opened?
When I left from there, this was in 45 when I left. I left from there to Bucharest. Then I left. The reason I left there is where I did feel anti-Semitism, because most of the ones which been in the Green Guard become communists. And the school made, I had a very good artistic group there, and we made a presentation. It was called the Friendship of the Countries, people from different countries. And for example, he didn't allow to be for a Jewish part, which still was there. He asked not to be Russians' names, which he liberated, but to be Romanian names, which I said this is not true because the Romanian assisted the Germans and the Russians didn't liberate. And he was the censor. Then was, and we had lots, the school did belong like here to the VA, to the girls, which the parents the father was in war or, persecuted or things like this. So was a big factory there, a paper mill factory, which the king had a part in it too. And they had their big meeting, something, and I was invited. And the same censor said for me not to go because I would be attacked there. And my brother-in-law was very much afraid, and I said, no, I'm going because these are my students. When I come there, they gave me flowers from all over, even throw the flowers on the stage. And everybody thanked me for how good I take care of their children, and it was big girls already. And I teach there for 2 years, and then they come and took the building for other institution.
The Russians took over?
The communists.
Right.
It was already a Romanian communist government. And actually, most of only education in agriculture was not communist yet, was social democrat. The rest was everything communist. So I decided I'm going to leave. It was a meeting where I was supposed to present a report, and I was told that some people are against me. So when I come to the meeting, I said that I didn't bring my report. I'm going to send it written, but I'm resigning. So my boss, the one who was my boss, gave me over the table a little note and said, nobody's against you except the person sitting on your right. And this was the next one, the mayor. And when I read the note, I said, I did come to resign, but I changed my mind because I know some people here would be happy, and I don't want to make them happy. And I stayed for a short while again, and then I left to Bucharest. And when I got to Bucharest, my brother was living there. I was going there every week, carrying them food there, every weekend.
What happened to your mother, Luba, during...
Oh, my mother was killed. My mother stayed home, and the whole city, Jewish people from the city, was evacuated. My mother lived with my aunt, my mother's aunt, actually, but we all called her aunt. And when the Germans come in, everybody ran to the Russians, and they had to go through a hill. And when they come to the bottom, to go to the bottom of the hill, everybody was shot.
They were shot as they were running away from Germans to
from
the
Germans
Russians.
to the Russians. All my mother's family and part of my father's family. A small part of my father's family remained there.
About how many Jewish people lived in that place?
And in my city was about 300
300
Jewish
people.
families, yes. Not people, families.
Families.
Yes, yes. And, well, I don't know where I stopped now.
Well, you were working, finishing your work at the school.
Yes.
And you
I
went to
left,
Bucharest.
I went to Bucharest, and I stayed with my brother. And I intended to open something there, and I didn't know if I'm going to remain there. And one evening we went to visit a friend, a doctor, which he lived in Romania where we lived before. And there was the director. My brother was the doctor at the Joint at this time in Bucharest.
The Joint. Can you tell us what the Joint
The
is?
Joint is a Jewish organization, American Jewish organization, which was helping the Jewish people to go away, or the ones that need medical help, or food, or housing, anything the Jewish people did need. And this was strictly American organization. And was a Dr. Kostiner, which he was the head of this. He was a law, doctor in law. He was the head of this organization. And when we've been visiting this doctor, he was there too, and other friends of my brother's. And this doctor started to insist for me to tell him how I escaped from deportation, and I really never wanted to talk about it. And they insisted. So finally I told them, and he said, "What would you like now?" And I said, "Now I would like to go to Palestine." And he said, "Well, if he wants to, you can go." And this was his Dr. Kostner. I said, "Well, if he wants to, then I'd be more than happy to go." And he didn't say one word, nothing. Next morning, 10 o'clock, I had a telephone call, and he said, "This is Dr. Kostner. You did cost me 1,000 blankets and 500 pillows." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yes, the Polish people are leaving now to Palestine, and they asked me for 1,000 pillows and 1,000 blankets, but I gave them all I had. But with one condition, that they have to give me one place on their ship. So find your brother right away and go through had to do all the tests, lung x-rays, all kind of tests, vaccinations." So I find my brother, and he took me, and I left with this Polish group.
You went alone. You left
Yeah,
your...
I left them, and I went alone to Palestine.
How long had you been thinking about going to Palestine? When was it an idea for you?
Well, the idea was when I finished high school. I had an uncle in Israel, and he wanted me to come there. So my brother, my sisters, my father, my mother talked me out about it. They said, "First time you finish school, there is a hard life, there you would have to work hard." And as a matter of fact, a cousin came to pick me up, but the papers didn't work out, and I stayed. And at this time, I just decided that I would like to go because I wanted to go away from the communists. This time already, the country became communist. When I worked in school, and I went to the Minister of Education, which is the only from the old people still left in the Romanian government, but he doesn't have any power there. And I went to him, and soon I walked in, he said to me, I had a hard time getting to him. I did need a letter from a journalist from the main newspaper to be able to get in. And when I went in, I said, I didn't know that to Democrats you need to have special protection. I'm 3 days waiting around here. And he asked me to sit, and I didn't because I said, I know it's your time to leave, and I'm sorry it's so late, but this is when I could come in. And I sent in all the papers in the program of the school before that. And he stood 2 hours. I stood and he stood. And we talked about all kinds of things about it. And he promised to send me everything I need. We need to heat, books, money, all kinds of things to support the school. He promised everything. But first thing he asked me, he said, you're not Romanian. And I said, all my life I had the accent because my parents been Russian and home I spoke Russian. So even I was a teacher of Romanian language, I still had a Russian accent. And I said, well, I am Romanian. I'm Jewish from Bessarabia. He said, I didn't ask religion. I said, well, when I talk to somebody, I like them to know to who they talk. And he said, well, everything is fine. You're just too young for the job. So I took out my ID and showed him. He said, 30 years from now, if we can meet again, I would like to see you. You fool me like you fool me now. Well, I was there 30 years later, but was no sense to go to him. So after this, when I left with this Polish group, and instead to get to Palestine, I got to Cyprus. When I got in Cyprus, it was terrible weather. We went to Bulgaria, and we had to change trains there, and it was snow and cold. I couldn't get a warm coat out from Romania, and I had a fur seal coat. They made me leave it. I had a lined coat with fur inside in a brown lamb color. I had to take it off and just take the material so I can line it and have a coat. So when we got to Cyprus, it was muddy and was, tents. Just tents put up, and it was raining. It was miserable weather. And they asked me to which organization I belonged. And I said, I never did belong to any organizations. And to say to which organization I belong, I have to know what they stand for. So I said, well, they said, you have to belong to organizations so you would have food from the kitchen from the organization. I said, when it's question from food, I don't care what organization. You put me whatever you want. So they put me to the strictly Orthodox organization. Well, there, when I was traveling with a couple, which my brother helped them a lot through joint. First of all, their mother was a brother, a son, father, and mother. And the mother was left in Romania because she wasn't able to travel. And my sister-in-law kept her in hospital because she had big eye trouble. So my brother was happy that I'm living with them. So when we got there, you're supposed to be in a tent, 6 people. So she said, would you stay with us? I said, yes. I met another young girl. She was by herself. She was a little bit younger than I was. I said, yes, if she can stay too. And I had a very bad cold with fever. And when we start to put up the tent, she says to me, girls, you have to look for some rocks and put around. And they've been 3 men. It was her brother, her son, and her husband. And she wanted us to carry the rocks to put around the tent. So I said, well, I don't think I'm going to stay here. And I started to walk. We walked away. And when we walked away, we met a man. When I was in Romania and I was running the school, did come in to me a lady, which she was from Chernobyl. And she told me she would like to come in and learn in school a profession because her husband is a lawyer and he cannot practice. And she has a little child and his sister and her. So I told her that it's against the rules, but I make her other offer. She can come to my house, and I'd be glad to teach her and help her with anything I can. And she says, right now we don't have what to eat. So I took a lot of coupons because food was at this time of coupons. And I did some things which really haven't been too much legal because when I registered students, I registered them a lot and they had all to give the birth certificates. And right away I took out food books, which you get food on it, bread and everything else, whatever they give the Russians. And then we had just place for so many. So all these books been left and I gave them to the bakery. And the baker was taking care for whatever we did need for the school, like exchange some bread for sugar, whatever I would send them, at least he would do it. So I took a few of these books and gave them. So first of all, they would have what to eat. And then she was coming every evening. I would give her 2 hours and I helped them. And then they left to Palestine. So here I walking in on the bridge, because was 3 camps there. Was 2, one summer camp and one winter camp. And we've been in the winter camp. And the winter camp was divided in 3 big camps, because there was 15,000 people in these 2 camps.
These are all
The
Jewish
same,
people
all Jewish people
who are
yes.
waiting to go from Cyprus. And what year was this that you were in this camp?
This was, let's see, what we made, 44 years ago.
You were in that
Exactly.
camp, okay.
Yeah.
And how long did you stay there before you made it to,
I stayed 1 year and 2 months.
in that tent
this
city,
camp.
in that camp?
Yeah, and
Did you
this-
know before you left Romania that this was going to happen to you?
no.
You thought you were going directly?
Straight to Palestine. This was never expected. And when I was, so this man, I met this man of this lady, which I gave her, you know, Neumann, it's Dr. Neumann. So he said, where are you? And I told him where, and he said, you're not going to stay there, you're going in my camp, coming right now with me. I'm going to go there, give beds. They gave us a bed, mattress, straw mattress, pillow. He said, I'm going to take all this and give them back there, and give them your food book, and I'm going to take you to our
Their home.
to ours, not home,
tent.
Tent. And I asked him, but Gabi, but this girl, he said, we'll fix her up too. So I didn't go back there. He brought our luggage, whichever luggage was, because, see, the English people did a lot of bad things, but was never talked about it, because they gave us a terrible treatment. This was the English camp.
The British were running
The
this
British,
camp.
yes. They gave us terrible food, and when we arrived, we walked in one day, in one door, and this means they disinfect us with DTT, and they took our luggage and they took out everything they wanted except clothes. I had medicine, I had some preserved food, I had sunglasses, I had a camera. They took everything except the clothes they left. When I went out at the other door and they gave me the luggage, there was nothing there left but clothes. And generally, the treatment was terrible. The food, the whole camp was smelling from old lamb, you know, very bad. The joint was helping by giving us some bread and some fruits, most of this, some grapes, and cigarettes, which I didn't smoke.
Now tell us, let's go on and tell us the circumstances for leaving Cyprus and the arrival in Israel.
A short
in
time
Palestine.
after I was in Cyprus, this lady, which I stayed with, insisted that I go to other camp. We went to have vaccinations. And she said, why don't you change your shoes? Why don't you put in this dress? And I didn't understand why she wanted to make me so elegant. And then after we had the vaccination, she said, would you go with me to the next camp? I have a Hungarian friend there. So I went with her and with her little girl. And when I come there, they brought in Bernard, which is my husband, and introduced me.
I see.
And after 2 weeks, we got married.
I see.
So it was a quick decision. But I remember what my sister-in-law was telling me. She was telling me, so if you get married and you get married good and happy, it's good. If not, instead 2 unhappy people, better 4 happy people. So I started to think, I'm going to go by myself. He looked very good. He was very good looking. He was very gentleman. And we didn't have a common language. It was very difficult. But we adjusted ourselves. And the reason we got married so quick, see, I got the possibility to leave. Because all of a sudden they said that the girls can leave, but the men not, because of the army. So he said, you want to leave and wait for me, or you want to get married? So I said, well, if I leave, I don't promise I'm going to wait. Because we both had nothing, you know. So he said, so why I'm not going to let you leave and we're going to get married. And we had a real nice wedding right there in the camp. And we stayed till Israel become independent. As soon as Israel become independent, we left to Israel. And Bernard went first, and I stayed 2 days there at the point where we arrived. And then we went to Israel to a cousin of Bernard's. And my sister sent me some money with somebody else, which I sold. I had some gold pieces and some dollars. And we were thinking we are very rich, but at this time, the Israeli pound, you had to give $3 and you got less than 1 Israeli pound. So actually what we were thinking, we have lots of money, wasn't a lot. And now comes the question, if we get a house, apartment to stay, and I was pregnant 3 months, or we are going to get a store. So I said, no, I'm tired from wandering around not to have a house. So Bernard said, okay, you think. From the house, we wouldn't have a store. From the store, we would have a house. So I figured he's right. In the morning, I said, okay, we take the store. We took us a big store. We had to borrow some money to this cousin, one man, which was a single man. He loaned us some money too, and we rented. There you had to give key money to rent. Let's say you pay $3,000. If you stay there just 1 year, you get $2,000 back, but if you stay longer, then you get nothing back. This was at this time, the arrangements.
What city were you in?
And Ramat Gan.
Ramat Gan.
Yes, it's a beautiful city. It's still beautiful. Now Ramat Gan is a kind of one unified with Tel Aviv. Before it was a big distance between Ramat Gan and Tel Aviv, but now it's built up. And we divided the store. I made a big drapery. One area, the first area in the store was 2 stories high, and in the back was just one height. So we divided this in 2, and then we built a room upstairs. And we opened a store of dresses, and upstairs we lived. This is where I had my first baby. And then we rented a house. From there we went out and rented a house. And the house had humidity, and I can stand, I'm not allergic to anything, but when it comes to mildew, I just cannot stand the smell. And then I find my cousin come from Jerusalem. I had a cousin, which he was like the right hand to Ben Gurion. And he come, he wanted to loan me